The works of Dr. Seuss at this point in time, I think, have earned the honour of being considered timeless. Since 1940, his works have enthralled children, who grew into adults who showed their children, who grew into adults and showed their children, who grew into adults and showed their children. We're at least 4 generations into Seuss exposure, and I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of people could name at least one of his works. In fact, probably one of his most famous creations ended up becoming a much-loved festive classic, spawning 2 remakes and multiple sequels. Yes, How the Grinch Stole Christmas has been enthralling young and old since it debuted in 1966. But what you may not know is that it's actually technically the middle film in a trilogy. Because in 1977, long after Boris Karloff had monster mashed his way up that stairway to heaven, ABC commissioned Dr. Seuss Enterprises to write, produce and create a full-blown prequel to How the Grinch Stole Christmas, in an attempt to capture the hearts and minds of America's youth in the same way the original had 11 years prior. The result was Halloween is Grinch Night, also known in some territories simply as It's Grinch Night. I assume they basically flipped between the titles depending on whether it was October or not. So, this isn't so much a film, more a TV special, but that's okay. We're all inclusive here, and especially at Halloween. The film opens with a montage of surreal and absurdist spookery over the opening titles before we arrive on a glorious sunny day in Whoville. The special doesn't clarify that it's October, hell, even the word Halloween isn't even mentioned once, but sod it, in my headcanon it's October 31st and the Who's down in Whoville have no idea about how spooky it's all about to get. Life's good and all is grand, but the sun is beginning to set, and one of the Who's down in Whoville by the name of Josiah, whilst outside doing chores, catches a faint but very particular smell. It's a sweet, sour smell. He calls his wife Maria, and she catches a whiff, and she confirms there is an unmistakable odour in the wind. An odour that means they need to stop what they're doing right away, gather the kids and batten down the hatches. Because the smell is the beginning of a chain reaction that'll ultimately lead to one of the scariest nights of the year, Grinch Night. Because you see, when the smell intensifies, it whistles through the trees and wakes up the Gree-Grumps, who begin to howl and whine, which in turn upsets the nearby lakes and ponds, causing them to grunkle, which in turn disturbs the Hackencracks, who begin to howl, and that is the exact noise that rings like an alarm bell up Mount Crumpit to a certain Mr. Grinch, who's beyond delighted that this is his special night. The rare occasion where he gets to load up his paraphernalia wagon and head down to Whoville to unleash untold terror and horror on the goodly Whos. After a literal song and dance about how excited he is that tonight's the night, the Grinch gets Max to pull the wagon up to the entrance of his cave, where he gets on and starts whipping him to get him to pull the cart down the side of Mount Crumpit. All the while, Max internally sings a song that basically implies that he's a slave. Meanwhile, back down in Whoville, Josiah and Mariah are trying to explain the happenings to their grandchildren. One of the kids, Euphoriah, suggests to Josiah that barricading themselves into the house is all well and good, but that they'll have no idea when the Grinch has been and gone if they don't alert the proper authorities. So, Josiah calls the Grinch Alarm Warden, who's stationed in a giant toadstool by the side of Mount Crumpit, who immediately goes on panic stations and begins a rather bizarre method of tracking the Grinch's movements. While this is going on, Euphoriah also urgently tells his grandparents that he needs to use the euphemism, the outhouse to you and me. His grandparents are hesitant, but he really needs to go, so they let him out. And almost immediately a large tree branch snaps off, hits Euphoriah and basically carries him off up the side of Mount Crumpit while his grandparents hopelessly watch on. When he eventually gets free of the branch, he's in the middle of nowhere halfway up the mountain, but he begins an uncertain walk to try and figure out a way to get back down. While this is going on, the Grinch spots a wuzzy woozoo and decides to try and hunt it for fun. Unfortunately for him, the woozoo outmaneuvers him, and he winds up with a butt full of brickles. While debrickling his backside by the roadside, Euphoriah stumbles on the pair. They have a fairly passive exchange. The Grinch is curious as to how the Who got so far up here, but ultimately deems Euphoriah not worth his time. And after explaining to him that he has better things to be getting on with, and that he's not going to waste effort on terrorising Euphoriah when there's literally a whole village down there waiting for him, he slowly heads off once again. This sets in motion the closing act of the film, as Euphoriah realises that he needs to stall the Grinch for as long as possible until hopefully either the sun rises or the sour sweet winds die down. In a totally absurd closing act in which Euphoriah must face some of the biggest fears the Grinch can muster, and Grinch Day gets ever closer, will the Grinch make it to Whoville? Will Euphoriah get his astigmatism properly dealt with? And what the fuck is a woozoo? All this and more will probably be answered if you check out Halloween is Grinch Night. And when it came to checking this thing out, I honestly had moderately high hopes. I understood that the fact it's largely been forgotten could very well be an indicator that I wasn't exactly getting into solid gold, but then there was a chance that because the first film was so universally loved that this just always got overshadowed and squeezed out of the conversation. Well, having actually watched it now, it's a TV special, alright. The script's kinda difficult to get a read on. On the one hand, this is aimed at quite young children, so it kinda has to be spooky within the realms of what young children in 1977 would have considered reasonably spooky but not too spooky. But it also can't be too complex because the crowd watching this would likely also be the same crowd tuning into Sesame Street. And they've also decided for some reason that this thing needed to have musical numbers in the same way the Christmas special did. So the result is a pretty simple plot, young Who stops Grinch before Grinch spooks town grunt, that's just kind of frustrated to help keep the runtime buoyant. There isn't really enough plot here to take it to the 25-ish minutes that this thing ultimately runs to. As such, they have to have Euphoriah try to stall the Grinch in 3 completely separate ways. When the musical numbers come up, they do their absolute damnedest to stretch them out as much as physically possible just to get it close to the required runtime. They have this weird thing where they try to vaguely tie it into the original special, but there are some continuity elements that they totally abandon, such as the Who's bizarre contraptions, or how in this movie there's a Grinch alert system, but in what is supposed to be the sequel, the alert system is nowhere to be found. Tonally, it's pleasant enough. I think they get a nice level of very light and easy to understand humour, and they contrast that with some genuinely absurd and unsettling visuals in places. This isn't an unpleasant film to sit through at all, but there's just not enough here really to win anyone over. There's a basic 3-act structure, it slows down quite a bit in the second act, but I suppose the best way I can describe it is, if you're okay with something being a bit long-winded if it has an okay vibe, I think you'll probably quite get on with this. When I got to the 20-minute mark and started thinking of all the other great animated Halloween specials like Witch's Night Out or Garfield's Halloween Adventure, and how much I'd prefer to be watching those than this, I think you can appreciate that that's a serious problem for a production to have. The script was written by Dr. Seuss, and it was one of the first animated projects that he worked on that wasn't originally based on a book. This was an entirely original story specially written for ABC. I'm not going to run you through Dr. Seuss's written works, we all know Dr. Seuss. He's Dr. Seuss, and he died in 1991 at the age of 87. The special was directed by Gerald Baldwin. He has 21 directing credits, with his best-known work likely being Yogi's First Christmas, over 150 episodes of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends, and a couple of Smurfs and Garfield festive specials. He sadly passed away in 2018 at the age of 89. And in terms of the art direction of this piece, I think it's actually not too bad. With it being a sort of prequel to Christmas, I think they've more or less managed to capture the same visual influence of that film, but they've altered it just enough to allow it to stand on its own. A big recurring problem I have with this special is that it reeks of feels-like vibes. Almost every aspect of this thing feels like it's desperately trying to recapture that love and affection people had with the previous film. And as such, this ends up coming off as feeling almost like the value brand equivalent to the original's originalness. It's the Dr. Pete, the Roller Cola, the Mountain Mist to Christmas's Pepper, Coke and Dew. But that's not to say it doesn't have something going for it. The absurdist nightmare sequences in the third act I thought were fantastically handled. I actually kind of prefer the Grinch's slight redesign here to the originals. I like that Whoville gets explored a little bit more visually, even if it doesn't particularly add that much and is missing the weirdness that Christmas established. I think for a mid-budget TV special, this thing looks about as good as most specials of that budget looked at the time. But I think with it being a Seuss production, the bar for people was, and should be, a lot higher than what we ultimately ended up with. That being said, this is a colourful, vibrant-looking production that, while not perfect, at least clearly shows some effort was put into it. And as I've always said, I'll respect something that tries and fails over something that never bothered to begin with. It may have been chasing lightning in a bottle, but at least it put up a good fight to do it. Performance-wise, Hans Conried tries his best, but he's no Karloff. I actually think his performance here is pretty solid, all things considered, but for lack of a better word, there's just an element of malicious sparkle that Karloff's take had with his Grinch that Hans's version just doesn't, unfortunately. It's by no means a bad performance at all, but it's just one of those cases where when you've had gold, why settle for silver, you know? Gary Shapiro is really solid as Euchariah. The way his character is written in this had the very real chance of becoming insufferable. But the sparkle that's missing from Hans's performance is very much found in Gary's. It's animated, lively, convincing, and just comes across as full of heart, which I really feel that character needed in order to sell the performance. As for the rest of the cast, they're absolutely fine, but they get let down something chronic by the writing, unfortunately. The thing's written like a book, which means when it's performed like someone reading a book, not like someone voice acting for an animated special. The cast try their best, and there's no performance that I could really fault, but there is some ropey dialogue here that stops them ever really getting above adequate. And finally, the soundtrack. And you probably know what I'm already going to say. It sounds like someone listened to the musical numbers from How the Grinch Stole Christmas and basically went, yeah, I can do that, easy mate. Because what we have here is a score and musical numbers that at best generously could be called sound-alikes, or at the very least tone-alikes to the original film, but just not as good. We're back to the value brand equivalent stuff again, and it's a real shame because, again, on its own merits, it's not really that bad, it's just not great, and in my opinion, barely even good. It would have been nice to see some style progression. It's the late 70s at this point, and they're copying the sound of a film from the mid-60s, which in itself was trying to ape holiday classics of the 40s and 50s. It sounds well and truly done by this point, and it just really wasn't my thing. As far as I can see, Halloween is Grinch Night hasn't yet had a UK exclusive release. I can't find a VHS for it at all, but it did get released over here on DVD and Blu-ray via US sets that weren't region locked. From the US's perspective, the film first found its way to a home release in 1985, when Playhouse Video released it on VHS. It would subsequently be reissued in 1989, 1992, 1996, 1998 and 2003 across multiple different distributors. It also got its first DVD release in 2003 courtesy of Universal Studios Home Entertainment. It finally made its way to Blu-ray in October of 2018 by Warner Brothers, where it was basically relegated to an extra feature, The Ultimate in Cinematic Shame, as part of their Ultimate Edition release of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which also featured the final part of this Grinch trilogy, The Grinch Grinches the Cat in the Hat. And that's it for it. By all accounts, every release this thing has had has either been as a bare-bones standalone release, or it's been buried in the extras of other Dr. Seuss-related animated films. And personally, I think that's probably the best place for it. Is Halloween is Grinch Night worth your time? If I'm being honest, probably not. Given just how oversaturated Halloween-related media is, it'd be hard to throw a rock and not hit some decent Halloween specials of some description. For that reason alone, I can't recommend this one if you're looking for a top-quality spooky watch this season. But if you've seen all the staple classics and are hearing about this for the first time, or if you've had it on your radar and have never seen it and are a bit fatigued with the Halloween Tree or Mad Mad Monster Party, then sure, why not? Throw this thing on and spend 30 minutes just kind of feeling like you've seen this before but not being entirely sure of the whens, hows, and most importantly, whos.